The storm had arrived without warning that October evening, turning the streets of Chicago into rivers of confusion and chaos. Victoria Chen stood beneath the inadequate shelter of a cafe awning, watching as pedestrians scrambled for cover, their umbrellas turning inside out against the violent wind. She had just left another disappointing meeting with investors who smiled politely while rejecting her pharmaceutical company's latest proposal. 20 years of building Chen Industries from nothing, and still, she had to prove herself in rooms full of men who saw her gender before her genius. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Her phone buzzed with another message from her assistant. The quarterly reports needed her signature tonight. The merger talks with Blackstone required her immediate attention. The board meeting had been moved to tomorrow morning. Victoria silenced the phone and slipped it into her Prada handbag. At 53, she had everything she once thought would make her happy. The penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan, the private jet, the respect of her peers, earned through ruthless determination and countless sleepless nights. Yet standing there in the rain, watching strangers rush past with their small concerns and ordinary lives, she felt the familiar emptiness that no amount of success seemed to fill. Her driver was late. Traffic, probably. She considered walking the 6 blocks to her office, but her Louboutin heels were not designed for urban hiking in a downpour. Instead, she pulled her coat tighter and waited, her mind already racing through tomorrow's agenda. The pharmaceutical industry never slept, and neither did Victoria Chen. Sleep was for people who had nothing to prove, nothing to run from, nothing to forget. That was when she noticed the figure huddled against the building 3 doors down. At first, Victoria thought it was just a pile of discarded clothes or trash bags. The city was full of such eyesores. But then the pile moved, a small shiver that was barely perceptible in the fading light. Victoria looked away. Chicago had thousands of homeless people. It was not her responsibility. She donated generously to charities, wrote checks that made board members at nonprofit organizations weep with gratitude. That was enough. That had to be enough. But something made her look again. The figure was too small, the proportions wrong for an adult. Victoria felt an uncomfortable prickling at the base of her neck. She took a step closer, then another. The rain was falling harder now, and the figure, definitely a child, was completely exposed to the elements. No coat, no umbrella, nothing but what looked like a thin sweater and jeans that were soaked through. Victoria's first instinct was to call someone. There must be services for this, authorities who handle these situations. Her hand reached for her phone, but stopped. The child was shaking violently now, and Victoria realized with a jolt that she was watching someone in genuine danger. Hypothermia could set in quickly, especially in a child. The temperature had dropped 15 degrees in the last hour, and the wind made it feel even colder. Before she fully realized what she was doing, Victoria was walking toward the huddled figure. Her expensive heels clicked against the wet pavement, each step taking her further from the comfortable distance she maintained from the world's suffering. Up close, she could see it was a girl, maybe 13 or 14, with dark hair plastered to her face and skin that had taken on a bluish tinge that Victoria recognized from her years of medical research. This was not just cold. This was the beginning of serious physiological distress. The girl did not seem to notice her approach. Her eyes were closed, her breathing shallow and rapid. Victoria crouched down, ignoring the puddle that immediately soaked through her coat. She reached out and touched the girl's shoulder, shocked by how cold the skin felt even through the wet fabric. The girl's eyes opened slowly, unfocused and glassy. They were a striking shade of amber, unusual and beautiful even in their current state of distress. For a moment, she simply stared at Victoria without recognition or response, as if she was looking through her rather than at her. "We need to get you out of this rain," Victoria said, her voice sharper than she intended. The girl did not respond, did not move. Victoria tried again, this time placing both hands on the girl's shoulders. "Can you stand? Do you understand me?" A faint nod was the only answer. Victoria looked around, hoping to see her driver, but the street was nearly empty now. Everyone with sense had found shelter. She made a decision that surprised even herself. "Come on, I'm taking you somewhere warm." She tried to help the girl to her feet, but the moment she put weight on her legs, they buckled. Victoria caught her, feeling the alarming lightness of the body in her arms. When was the last time this child ate? The girl's eyes rolled back, and Victoria felt panic surge through her chest in a way that was entirely foreign. She was Victoria Chen. She did not panic. She solved problems, made decisions, moved forward. But this was different. This was a child collapsing in her arms in the rain. And for the first time in decades, Victoria felt genuinely afraid. The girl went completely limp, her head falling against Victoria's shoulder. Victoria adjusted her grip, shocked by how little the girl weighed, how fragile she felt. She looked around desperately. Her driver was nowhere in sight. There were no taxis. The street was deserted except for the two of them, alone in the storm. Victoria did something she had not done in years. She acted on pure instinct rather than calculation. She lifted the girl properly into her arms, struggling slightly with the dead weight and her own lack of physical strength. Her daily routine consisted of treadmill sessions with her tablet, propped up reading reports, not carrying unconscious teenagers. But adrenaline provided what fitness did not, and she managed to support the girl's weight as she hurried back toward the cafe. The warmth inside hit her like a wall. Several customers looked up from their laptops and conversations, their expressions shifting from curiosity to alarm as they took in the scene. Victoria ignored them all, making her way to the nearest booth and laying the girl down as gently as she could manage. "Someone call an ambulance," she commanded, her voice carrying the authority that made boardrooms fall silent. "Now." A young man at the counter immediately pulled out his phone. A barista rushed over with a stack of clean towels. Victoria took them and began drying the girl's face and hair with more gentleness than she knew she possessed. The girl's eyes fluttered open again, those strange amber eyes that seemed to hold secrets Victoria could not begin to guess. Up close, with better lighting, Victoria could see the girl's face more clearly. There was a delicate bone structure beneath the pallor, high cheekbones, and a straight nose that suggested she would grow into striking beauty if she survived long enough. The thought sent another wave of unfamiliar fear through Victoria. This girl could die right here, right now, and Victoria would have been just another person who walked past and did nothing. The girl's lips moved, forming words Victoria could not hear. She leaned closer, turning her ear toward the barely audible whisper. "My bag," the girl managed. "Do not leave my bag." Victoria looked around and spotted a small backpack lying in the puddle where she had found the girl. Without thinking, she stood and walked back out into the rain, retrieving the soaked bag. It weighed almost nothing, containing probably everything this child owned in the world. The thought made Victoria's chest tighten in a way that felt almost physical. When she returned, the girl's eyes had closed again. The barista had brought blankets from somewhere, and together they wrapped the girl in layers of fleece and cotton. Victoria found herself sitting on the edge of the booth, one hand resting on the girl's shoulder in what she told herself was merely a check for continued breathing, but felt disturbingly like comfort. The ambulance arrived within 10 minutes, though it felt like hours. Paramedics swept in with professional efficiency, asking questions Victoria could not answer. No, she did not know the girl's name. No, she was not family. No, she had no medical history. She was just someone who happened to be there, who happened to notice, who happened to care enough to intervene. One of the paramedics, a woman with kind eyes and efficient hands, worked quickly to assess the girl's condition. "Severe hypothermia," she confirmed. "Blood pressure is low. We need to get her to County General immediately." She looked up at Victoria. "Are you coming with us?" Victoria opened her mouth to say no. She had done her part. The professionals were here now. She had a driver waiting somewhere, an office full of urgent matters, a life that did not include riding in ambulances with homeless teenagers. But then the girl's eyes opened again, those amber eyes finding Victoria's face with surprising focus. "Do not leave me," she whispered. "Please." 3 words. Just 3 words from a stranger, a child Victoria had no connection to, no responsibility for. Yet they struck something deep inside her, some long-buried place that remembered what it felt like to be young and afraid and desperately alone. Victoria Chen, who never made impulsive decisions, who carefully weighed every choice against potential outcomes and strategic advantages, found herself nodding. "I will come," she said. The ambulance ride was a blur of motion and medical jargon. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Victoria sat on the small bench, clutching the girl's backpack, watching as the paramedics worked. They had started in 4, wrapped the girl in warming blankets, attached monitors that beeped steadily. The girl drifted in and out of consciousness, occasionally making small sounds of distress that made Victoria's hands clench involuntarily. At the hospital, Victoria was ushered to a waiting area while the girl was rushed into treatment. She stood there in her wet coat, still holding the backpack, suddenly aware of how absurd she must look. Victoria Chen did not sit in emergency room waiting areas. She endowed wings of hospitals. She funded research facilities. She made generous donations that got plaques mounted on walls. But she did not personally involve herself in the messy, immediate reality of human suffering. Her phone buzzed incessantly. 14 missed calls from her assistant. 23 unread emails marked urgent. A text from her driver saying he had been waiting outside her office for 40 minutes. Victoria looked at the screen and then, in a gesture that would have shocked everyone who knew her, turned the phone off completely. She sat down in one of the plastic chairs, still holding the backpack. It was completely soaked, dripping water onto the linoleum floor. Victoria set it carefully on the chair beside her and unzipped it slowly, telling herself she was looking for identification, for some clue to who this girl was and who should be notified. That was the logical explanation. That was what a responsible person would do. Inside, there was not much. A change of clothes, worn but clean. A toothbrush and small tube of toothpaste. A battered paperback book with a library stamp from 3 years ago. A small plastic bag containing what looked like important documents. Victoria opened this last item carefully, spreading the papers on her lap. There was a birth certificate. Sophia Marie Torres, born 14 years ago in a Chicago hospital. Victoria calculated quickly. The girl was younger than she looked, small for her age, probably from chronic malnutrition. There was a school ID card from Lincoln Middle School, 2 years out of date. A tattered photograph of a woman, perhaps in her early 30s, with the same amber eyes and dark hair as the girl. On the back, written in careful script, was a single word, Mama. Victoria stared at that photograph for a long time. The woman looked tired but happy, smiling at whoever was behind the camera with genuine warmth. What had happened to her? Where is she now? Why was her daughter alone on the streets in a storm? At the bottom of the plastic bag was another document, this one more recent. Victoria unfolded it carefully, her eyes scanning the official letterhead. It was a death certificate. Isabella Torres, deceased 6 weeks ago. Cause of death: complications from pneumonia. Victoria felt something cold settle in her stomach. 6 weeks. This girl had been alone for 6 weeks, navigating the city streets, trying to survive without anyone to help her, anyone to care. She looked up as a doctor approached, a tired-looking man in his 40s with the permanent slouch of someone who spent too many hours on his feet. "Are you family?" he asked, his tone suggesting he already knew the answer. "No," Victoria said. "I found her on the street. I brought her in." The doctor nodded, unsurprised. "Well, you may have saved her life. Another hour in those conditions, and we would be having a very different conversation." He consulted his tablet. "She is stable now. Core temperature is coming up. We are running tests, but it looks like severe malnutrition in addition to the hypothermia." "When was the last time she ate?" "I have no idea," Victoria admitted. "I do not know anything about her except what is in here." She gestured to the documents spread on her lap. The doctor glanced at them and sighed. "Another one. We see too many of these cases. Kids falling through the cracks, no family support, no safety net." He looked at Victoria more closely, taking in her expensive coat and designer handbag. You did a good thing, bringing her in. Most people would not have stopped. Most people would not have stopped. The words echoed in Victoria's mind. She had almost been one of those people. If the girl had been just a few feet further away, if the rain had been a little less heavy, if Victoria had been looking at her phone instead of up the street, she would have walked right past. The thought made her feel slightly sick. "Can I see her?" Victoria asked, surprising herself again. The doctor hesitated. "You are not family, and technically there are rules about visitors for minors without guardians present." But he looked at Victoria's face and seemed to see something there that made him relent. "Room 314. 10 minutes, that is all." Victoria gathered the documents and backpack and made her way to the third floor. Room 314 was at the end of a long corridor that smelled of antiseptic and despair. She knocked softly, though she knew the girl was probably asleep, and pushed open the door. Sophia lay in a hospital bed, looking even smaller surrounded by machines and monitors. Her color was better now, the dangerous blue tinge replaced by something closer to normal. And 4 dripped steadily into her arm. The wet clothes were gone, replaced by a hospital gown that was several sizes too large. Someone had washed her face and combed her hair, revealing features that were younger and more vulnerable than Victoria had initially thought. Victoria stood at the foot of the bed, uncertain what to do. She had never been good with illness or injury. When her employees got sick, she sent generous care packages assembled by her assistant. When board members were hospitalized, she sent flowers expensive enough to be impressive. But she did not visit. She did not sit at bedsides. She did not know how to offer comfort in any form other than financial. The girl's eyes opened slowly, taking a moment to focus. When they found Victoria, a flicker of recognition crossed her face. "You stayed?" she whispered, her voice hoarse. "I stayed," Victoria confirmed, moving closer despite her discomfort. "How are you feeling?" "Warm," Sophia said simply. "I have not been warm in a long time." The admission, so matter-of-fact and devastating, made Victoria's throat tighten. She pulled a chair close to the bed and sat down, setting the backpack on the floor beside her. "I brought your things. Your documents are safe." Sophia's eyes immediately went to the backpack, and Victoria saw relief flood her face. "Thank you. That is all I have left. Everything else is gone." "Gone where?" Victoria asked gently. Sophia looked away, staring at the ceiling tiles. "Our apartment. When Mama died, I tried to keep paying the rent with the money from her waitressing job, but it ran out. The landlord put everything on the curb. I managed to grab my backpack before someone took it. Everything else, Mama's things, our furniture, the photos, all gone." Victoria did not know what to say. What words existed that could address such complete loss? She was good with boardroom negotiations and strategic planning, not emotional support for traumatized teenagers. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the steady beep of the heart monitor. "How long have you been on the streets?" Victoria finally asked. Sophia seemed to consider the question. 3 weeks, maybe 4. I lost track. At first, I stayed in the apartment building stairwell, but building security kicked me out. Then I found places, a library during the day, a church basement sometimes at night. I tried to keep going to school, but without an address, they said I could not enroll anymore." Victoria felt anger rising, hot and unfamiliar. A child trying to continue her education and being turned away because of bureaucratic rules. "How did you survive?" "Odd jobs," Sophia said. "I watched people's dogs in the park. Helped at a farmer's market carrying bags for tips. A lady at soup kitchen would save me extra food sometimes." She shrugged. "You figured out. You figured out." As if survival on the streets was just another problem to solve, another challenge to overcome. Victoria found herself looking at this girl with something like awe. Here was someone who had lost everything, who had every reason to give up, and yet she kept fighting, kept trying, kept surviving. "Why did you not go to the authorities?" Victoria asked. "Child services, the police, someone?" Sophia's expression hardened. "Because they would put me in the system. Foster care. Mama made me promise when she knew she was dying. She made me swear I would not let them take me. She grew up in foster care. She said terrible things happened there, things she would never let happen to me. So I promised. I promised I would figure it out on my own. Victoria understood something then. This girl was not just homeless. She was actively hiding, avoiding help because she feared the very systems designed to protect her. It was a rational fear, given what Victoria knew about the foster care system's failures. But it was also a death sentence being delivered in slow motion. "Where are you going tonight?" Victoria asked. "In the rain?" "Nowhere," Sophia admitted. "Everywhere. Just trying to stay moving because when you stop moving, you get too cold, and then you cannot move anymore." Her eyes met Victoria's. "I was not supposed to stop. I knew if I sat down, I might not get up again. But I was so tired, so cold. I just needed to rest for a minute." A minute that could have been her last if Victoria had not happened to walk by, happened to notice, happened to care. The randomness of it was terrifying. How many other children were out there right now, alone and afraid, waiting for someone to notice, to care, to help? Victoria looked at this girl, this Sophia Torres who had lost everything but somehow maintained her dignity and determination, and felt something shift inside her. It was not a conscious decision, not a calculated strategic move. It was something more fundamental, more human. It was the simple recognition that she could not walk away from this. "The doctors say you will need to stay here for a few days," Victoria said carefully, "to recover fully and make sure there are no complications." "What happens after that?" Sophia's expression became guarded. "I will figure something out. I always do." "That is not a plan," Victoria said, more sharply than she intended. "You're 14 years old. You should not have to figure it out. You should be in school, worrying about homework and friends, not where you will sleep tonight." "Should is a nice word," Sophia said with a bitterness that sounded wrong coming from someone so young. "But should does not mean anything when you are alone. I learned that after Mama died. Everyone was very sorry, very sympathetic, but when I asked for help, suddenly they were all very busy with their own problems." Victoria recognized that bitterness. She had felt it herself once, a lifetime ago, when she was young and alone and trying to survive in a world that did not care. She had channeled that bitterness into ambition, into success, into building walls so high that nothing could hurt her again. Looking at Sophia now, she saw what she might have become if her walls had trapped her outside instead of inside. A nurse came in to check Sophia's vitals, breaking the moment. Victoria stood, suddenly aware of how long she had been there, how late it must be. The nurse gave her a pointed look that said visiting hours were definitely over. "I should go," Victoria said, picking up her handbag. "You need rest." Sophia's hand shot out, catching Victoria's wrist with surprising strength. "Will you come back?" Her voice was small, vulnerable in a way it had not been before. "Please?" Victoria looked down at the hand on her wrist, the fingers thin and pale against her darker skin. She should say no. She should walk away, let the hospital handle this, let the system do whatever it did with homeless teenagers. She had done more than enough, more than anyone could expect. But when she opened her mouth, different words came out. "I will come back tomorrow," she promised. The smile that lit Sophia's face was like sun breaking through storm clouds. It transformed her features, revealing the beautiful woman she might grow up to be if someone gave her the chance. "Thank you. Thank you for not leaving me." Victoria walked out of the hospital into a night that had cleared. The storm finally passed. The air was cold and clean, washed fresh by the rain. Her driver had somehow tracked her down and was waiting in the parking lot, looking relieved when he saw her. During the drive back to her penthouse, Victoria stared out the window at the city lights, her mind racing. What had she just promised? What was she getting herself into? She had no experience with children, no idea how to help someone like Sophia. Her life was carefully constructed around her work, her routine, her comfortable isolation. There was no room in it for a traumatized teenager who needed more than Victoria knew how to give. But she had made a promise. Victoria Chen kept her promises. It was one of the few principles she lived by, part of what made her successful in business. Your word had to mean something, or you had nothing. If she said she would return tomorrow, then she would return tomorrow. What happened after that, she would figure out. The penthouse was exactly as she had left it that morning. Immaculate, modern, expensive, 3,000 square feet of prime real estate overlooking Lake Michigan, decorated by an interior designer who understood that Victoria wanted elegance without personality, beauty without warmth. Every surface gleamed. Every piece of furniture was positioned precisely. It looked like a photograph from a luxury magazine, which was exactly the point. Victoria dropped her keys in a bowl by the door and walked through the space, suddenly seeing it through different eyes. How many rooms were there that she never used? 4 bedrooms when she only needed one. A formal dining room where she never entertained. A library filled with books she never read, purchased by the designer to fill the shelves. So much space, so much money, so much emptiness. She poured herself a glass of wine and stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the glittering city. Somewhere down there, in that vast urban landscape, were other children like Sophia. Alone, cold, hungry, invisible to the people who walked past them every day. Victoria had been one of those people until tonight. She had trained herself not to see, not to feel, not to engage with suffering she could not solve with a check and a tax deduction. But now she had seen, she had felt, and she could not unsee it, could not unfeel it, no matter how much easier that would be. Her phone, which she had finally turned back on, buzzed with accumulated messages. Her assistant wondering where she had been. Board members concerned about missed meetings. Investors requesting urgent calls. The pharmaceutical merger hanging in balance. An entire empire of responsibilities and obligations that she had ignored for hours while sitting in a hospital with a child she barely knew. Victoria scrolled through the messages and then, in a decision that would have consequences she could not yet imagine, she typed a single response to her assistant. Clear my morning schedule. Something important came up. She hit send before she could second-guess herself. That night, Victoria did not sleep well. She kept thinking about Sophia alone on the streets for weeks, about Isabella Torres dying and leaving her daughter with nothing but fear and a desperate promise. She thought about the casual cruelty of systems that failed children, about the randomness of fate that put some people in penthouses and others on sidewalks. She thought about the girl's amber eyes and that moment of recognition when their gazes met in the rain. Most of all, she thought about the promise she had made. I will come back tomorrow. 3 words, just like Sophia's plea. Do not leave me. 6 words between them that had somehow shifted the axis of Victoria's carefully controlled world. When dawn finally broke over the lake, Victoria was already awake, staring at the ceiling and wondering what she had set in motion. She got up and went through her usual routine. Expensive coffee from her imported machine. A shower in her marble bathroom. Her closet, the size of most people's bedrooms, yielded the day's armor of designer suit and modest jewelry. In the mirror, Victoria Chen looked exactly as she always did. Polished, professional, in control. But she did not feel the same. Something had changed last night, some fundamental shift that she could not quite name. It was not guilt, though that was part of it. It was not pity, though she felt that too. It was something deeper, more personal. It was the uncomfortable recognition that her success, her wealth, her carefully constructed life meant nothing if she used it to insulate herself from the world's pain rather than addressing it. Victoria called her driver and gave him an address that was not her office. The hospital, she said. County General. If he was surprised, he did not show it. The ability to maintain professional discretion was why Victoria paid him well. The drive took 30 minutes in morning traffic, giving her time to rehearse what she would say. But when they arrived and she took the elevator to the 3rd floor, all her planned speeches evaporated. Sophia was awake, sitting up in bed, eating breakfast from a plastic tray. Hospital food, bland and institutional, but she ate with focus and appreciation. When Victoria knocked and entered, the girl's face lit up with that same transformative smile. You came back, Sophia said, as if she had not quite believed it would happen. I said I would, Victoria replied, pulling the visitor chair close to the bed. How are you feeling? Better. Warm and fed. The doctor said my test came back okay. No permanent damage from the hypothermia. She paused. He also said you saved my life. That I would have died if you had not found me. Victoria waved away the gratitude. uncomfortable with the weight of it. Anyone would have done the same. No, Sophia said firmly. They would not have. I was out there for hours before you came. Dozens of people walked past. You were the only one who stopped. The observation hung between them, impossible to refute. Victoria changed the subject. The doctor mentioned you would be discharged in a day or two. We need to talk about what happens next. Sophia's expression became guarded again. I will figure something out. Stop saying that, Victoria said, more harshly than she intended. She took a breath, moderating her tone. I have a proposal for you, but I want you to listen before you respond. Sophia set down her fork, giving Victoria her complete attention. Those amber eyes were startlingly direct, older than they should be. Victoria had rehearsed this part, but now the words felt awkward and insufficient. You need a place to stay, a safe place where you can recover and figure out your next steps. I have a guest room in my apartment. Multiple guest rooms, actually. You could stay there for a while. Sophia stared at her. Why would you do that? You do not know me. It was a fair question, one Victoria had been asking herself since dawn. Why was she doing this? What did she owe this girl beyond the emergency intervention she had already provided? The logical answer was nothing. The emotional answer was far more complicated. Because no one helped me when I was young and alone, Victoria said, the words surprising her with their honesty. Because I know what it feels like to think the world does not care if you live or die. Because I can help, and that should be reason enough. Sophia continued to study her, trying to read beneath the surface of Victoria's polished exterior. What would you want in return? Victoria understood the question's weight. In Sophia's experience, help always came with strings attached. Nothing is free, especially not kindness. A roof over your head, Victoria said carefully. 3 meals a day. Stability while we figure out a more permanent solution. In return, I will want you to go back to school. Focus on your education. That is all. That is all, Sophia repeated, skepticism clear in her voice. There is always more. Victoria leaned forward, her expression serious. I'm not going to lie to you. This would not be easy. I work long hours. I travel frequently for business. I have no experience with teenagers or children of any kind. My apartment is not set up for a young person. I do not know how to be a guardian or a mentor or whatever you might need. But she paused, making sure Sophia was truly listening. I'm willing to try if you are. Why? Sophia asked again, more insistently. Rich people do not just take in random street kids. What do you really want? The question struck something deep in Victoria, some place she normally kept carefully locked away. She thought about the truth, the real truth beneath all her rationalizations and noble intentions. She thought about Isabella Torres dying alone, leaving her daughter to survive on the streets. She thought about all the ways the world had failed this child, all the systems that should have protected her but did not. She thought about her own past, buried under decades of success, but never truly forgotten. Because 30 years ago, I was you, Victoria said quietly. Not homeless, but alone, angry, trying to survive in a world that saw me as disposable. Someone gave me a chance I did not deserve, and it changed everything. Maybe this is my chance to pay that forward. Or maybe she met Sophia's eyes directly. Maybe I'm just tired of living in a beautiful apartment with no one to care if I come home. The honesty seemed to reach Sophia in a way that polished words would not have. The girl's defensive posture softened slightly. What if it does not work out? What if I'm too difficult, or you change your mind? Then we figure out something else, Victoria said. But we do it together, not with you back on the streets. This is not a trial period where I will abandon you if you are not perfect. This is me offering you a chance to catch your breath, to be a kid again, to figure out your future from a place of safety instead of desperation. What do you say? Sophia looked down at her hands, picking at the hospital blanket. When she spoke, her voice was barely audible. My mama would not want me living with a stranger. She made me promise to stay out of the system, to not trust people who say they want to help. Your mama wanted you to be safe, Victoria said gently. If she were here now, seeing what you have been through these past weeks, do you think she would still want you on the streets? Tears welled up in Sophia's eyes. The first real emotion breaking through her carefully maintained control. No, she whispered. Mama wanted to be warm and fed and going to school. She always said education was how we were going to make a better life. She worked so hard so I could focus on studying instead of working like she did. Victoria reached out and took Sophia's hand, a gesture that felt awkward and foreign but somehow necessary. Then let me help you honor her wish. Let me give you the chance to get that education, to build that better life. You do not have to trust me completely. You do not have to call me family. You just have to be willing to try. Sophia wiped her eyes with her free hand, her jaw set with determination that reminded Victoria painfully of her younger self. Okay, she said finally. I will try. But she looked directly at Victoria. If you hurt me, if you turn out to be another person who makes promises they do not keep, I will leave. I will survive on the streets before I will let someone use me or hurt me. Understand? Victoria squeezed the girl's hand. I understand, and that is fair. You have every right to protect yourself. All I ask is that you give me a real chance before you make that decision. They sat like that for a moment, hands clasped across the hospital bed, two people from completely different worlds finding unexpected connection and shared understanding of what it meant to be alone. Victoria felt something strange and uncomfortable blooming in her chest, something that might have been hope or might have been fear, possibly both. The door opened and a social worker entered, a tired-looking woman with kind eyes and a clipboard. She introduced herself as Mrs. Patterson and explained that the hospital had notified child services about Sophia's situation. There were procedures to follow, forms to fill out, official channels that had to be navigated before Sophia could be released into anyone's care. Victoria listened to the bureaucratic explanation with growing frustration. Sophia needed immediate help, not a 6-week evaluation period while she bounced between emergency shelters. When Mrs. Patterson finished her explanation, Victoria pulled out her phone and made a call. David, she said when her lawyer answered. I need emergency temporary guardianship papers drawn up immediately. Yes, I know what that means. No, it cannot wait. I will send over the details within the hour. She listened for a moment. David, I pay you a substantial retainer specifically so that impossible things become possible. Make this happen today. She hung up and turned to Mrs. Patterson, who was watching with raised eyebrows. How quickly can your department move if all the necessary paperwork is filed correctly and a suitable living environment is verified? Mrs. Patterson blinked. Well, if everything is in order and there are no red flags in the background checks, potentially within a few days. But Ms. Chen, becoming a guardian is not something to rush into. There are responsibilities, legal obligations. I am aware, Victoria said crisply, and I am prepared to meet them. What do you need from me? For the next hour, Victoria navigated the bureaucratic maze with the same focused determination she brought to business negotiations. She arranged for her apartment to be inspected. She authorized background checks. She provided financial statements that made Mrs. Patterson's eyes widen. She called in favors from board members who sat on charitable foundations. By the time she finished, the social worker looked slightly dazed. I have to admit, Mrs. Patterson said, gathering her papers, I have never seen anyone move this fast or this efficiently through her system. Most people do not have the resources or connections to navigate it this way. Most people are not desperate to prevent a child from spending another night in danger, Victoria replied. Now, what else do you need? When Mrs. Patterson finally left, Sophia was staring at Victoria with something like awe. You just made all that happen in an hour. Victoria shrugged, uncomfortable with the admiration. I'm good at solving problems. This is just another problem. I'm not a problem, Sophia said, but without anger. Just stating a fact. Victoria caught herself. You are right. You are not a problem. You are a person who deserves safety and opportunity. I apologize for my poor word choice. Sophia smiled slightly. You talk like a business person. I'm a business person, Victoria said. But I'm learning that not everything in life can be approached like a business deal. She stayed with Sophia for the rest of the morning, partially because she did not want to leave the girl alone, partially because she had no idea what came next. They talked about small things. Sophia's favorite subjects in school had been math and art, an unusual combination. She loved to read, which explained the library book in her backpack. She missed her mother with an ache that never entirely went away. She was scared of the future, but trying not to show it. Victoria found herself sharing things she rarely talked about. Her own difficult childhood as the daughter of Chinese immigrants who worked themselves to exhaustion in a restaurant they never quite made profitable. The scholarship to Northwestern that changed her life. The mentor who saw potential in her and pushed her to aim higher than she thought possible. The years of grueling work to build Chen Industries from nothing. Sophia listened with surprising interest. "So you were not always rich," she observed. "No, I was poor and angry and determined to never be powerless again." In some ways, Victoria added thoughtfully, that anger made me successful, but also made me hard. It made me forget that success means nothing if you do not share it, if you do not use it to lift others up. "Is that what you're doing?" Sophia asked. "Lifting me up?" Victoria considered the question carefully. "I'm trying to. I do not know if I will succeed. I might be terrible at this. You might end up regretting accepting my offer." But she met Sophia's eyes again. "I'm going to try my best." They were interrupted by Victoria's phone, which had been buzzing with increasing urgency. She glanced at the screen and sighed. "I need to take this. My assistant is probably having a panic attack because I missed the board meeting this morning." She answered the call and walked to the window, lowering her voice but not enough to hide the tension. "Yes, I know I missed the meeting. No, it cannot be helped. Reschedule for tomorrow. The merger can wait one day. If Blackstone is too impatient, they're not the right partner for us anyway." She hung up and turned back to find Sophia watching her carefully. "Did I just cost you something important?" Victoria thought about the answer. A day ago, she would have said yes. The merger was worth hundreds of millions. Missing the board meeting could have serious consequences. But standing here now, looking at this girl who had almost died alone on the street, Victoria realized her priorities had shifted without her fully noticing. "No," she said firmly. "You did not cost me anything. I made a choice to be here instead of there. That is on me, not you." Sophia seemed to relax slightly. "Good. I do not want to be the reason you mess up your life." Victoria almost laughed. "My life is not messed up. It is just changing direction slightly. Change can be good." She hoped that was true. She hoped she was not making an enormous mistake that would hurt both of them. But looking at Sophia's hopeful expression, she thought that maybe, possibly, this was the first truly important decision she had made in decades. The next 2 days passed in a blur of paperwork, inspections, and bureaucratic hurdles. Victoria's lawyers worked miracles, greasing wheels and cutting through red tape with the efficiency that came from having unlimited resources. Her apartment was inspected and approved. Background checks came back clean. References were provided by people whose names carried weight. Mrs. Patterson seemed both impressed and slightly disturbed by how quickly everything fell into place. "The system is not usually this accommodating," she told Victoria during their final meeting. "I hope you understand the responsibility you're taking on." "I do," Victoria assured her, though she was not entirely certain that was true. How could anyone truly understand the weight of being responsible for another human being's welfare until they lived it? On Thursday afternoon, Victoria drove Sophia from the hospital to the penthouse. The girl was quiet during the drive, clutching her backpack and staring out the window at the city she had been surviving in for weeks. When they pulled up to the luxury building, she looked up at the glass and steel tower with wide eyes. "You live here?" Victoria glanced at the building, suddenly seeing it through Sophia's perspective. "Yes. Is that a problem?" "I have never been in a building this fancy," Sophia admitted. "Are you sure I am allowed?" "You are more than allowed. You live here now." Victoria's tone was firm, brooking no argument. "You belong here just as much as any of the other residents." The doorman greeted Victoria by name and held the door open, nodding politely to Sophia. The lobby was all marble and modern art, intimidating in its perfection. Sophia stayed close to Victoria as they crossed to the private elevator, her earlier confidence evaporating in the face of such obvious wealth. The elevator opened directly into Victoria's penthouse. Sophia stepped out slowly, her eyes going wide as she took in the expansive space. The wall of windows showing the lake. The minimalist furniture that probably cost more than most people's cars. The art that could have been in a museum. This is your home? Sophia's voice was small. Our home, Victoria corrected. For now, anyway. Let me show you your room. She led Sophia down the hallway to one of the guest bedrooms, the one she had hastily prepared with help from her assistant. It was still spare, still impersonal, but she had added a few things. A bookshelf filled with age-appropriate books, a desk for homework, warm bedding in shades of blue and green that seemed less stark than the rest of the apartment. Sophia stepped into the room slowly, setting her backpack down carefully as if afraid she might damage something. She walked to the window and looked out at the view, her reflection ghostly in the glass. This is mine? This is yours, Victoria confirmed. We can change anything you do not like. Add posters or paint the walls or whatever teenagers do to make rooms their own. Sophia turned around, and Victoria was shocked to see tears streaming down her face. I have not had my own room since Mama died. We shared one bedroom in our apartment because that was all we could afford. Before that, when I was little, we lived in so many different places. Shelters mostly. Sometimes just one room with a shared bathroom down the hall. I always dreamed of having my own room someday, but I never thought she could not finish. Victoria crossed the room and, in a gesture that surprised them both, pulled Sophia into a hug. The girl was stiff at first, then melted into the embrace, sobbing against Victoria's shoulder with the kind of desperate relief that came from finally being safe enough to fall apart. Victoria held her, one hand awkwardly patting her back, utterly out of her depth, but determined not to let go until Sophia was ready. This was what she had signed up for, not just providing shelter and food, but being present for moments like this, being the stable ground on which Sophia could stand while she grieved and healed and figured out who she would become. When the tears finally subsided, Sophia pulled back, wiping her eyes self-consciously. I am sorry. I did not mean to cry all over your fancy clothes. Victoria looked down at her designer suit, now damp with tears, and found she did not care at all. Do not apologize. You have earned a right to cry. She helped Sophia settle into the room, watching as the girl carefully unpacked her meager belongings. The worn clothes went into a dresser that could have held 50 times as many. The toothbrush and toothpaste found a place in the pristine in-soot bathroom. The battered library book went on the nightstand. The photo of Isabella Torres was placed carefully on the desk where Sophia could see it whenever she worked. That is your mom? Victoria asked, looking at the photograph more closely. Yes. Sophia's voice was soft. She was beautiful, was not she? Very beautiful, Victoria agreed. You look like her. Everyone says that. Sophia touched the photo gently. She worked so hard to take care of me. 3 jobs sometimes, try to save money, so we could get a better apartment, so I could go to college someday. She wanted me to have all the opportunities she never got. She sounds like a remarkable woman. She was. Sophia's voice broke slightly. She did not deserve to die like that. We cannot afford good health care. By the time she finally went to the hospital, the pneumonia was too advanced. If we had money, if we had insurance, she might have lived. The guilt and anger in those words were familiar to Victoria. How many times had she looked back on her own parents' deaths, wondering if better health care, less stress, more resources might have given her more years with them? Poverty killed people slowly and invisibly through lack of access, lack of options, lack of safety nets that everyone deserved but few received. That night, Victoria ordered dinner from an upscale Italian restaurant. Try to remember what teenagers like to eat. She guessed correctly with pasta, and they ate together at the dining table, a massive thing designed to seat 12 that had never been used for its intended purpose. Sophia was quiet, still processing everything that had happened. Tomorrow, we will go shopping for clothes and whatever else you need, Victoria said. School supplies, personal items, anything you want within reason. Sophia looked uncomfortable. I cannot pay you back. I'm not asking you to, Victoria replied. This is not a loan. Consider it an investment in your future. Why are you really doing this? Sophia asked suddenly. And do not give me the answer about paying it forward. There is something else. I can tell. Victoria set down her fork, considering whether to answer honestly. Sophia deserved the truth, or at least as much of it as Victoria understood herself. When I was building my company, I made a lot of sacrifices, she said slowly. I worked 18-hour days. I skipped meals. I cut people out of my life who I decided were distractions. I told myself it was all worth it, that success would make me happy. But then she gestured around the expensive apartment. I achieved everything I set out to do, and I realized I was more alone than I had been when I started. Success without someone to share it with is just expensive loneliness. So I am your someone to share it with? Sophia's tone was not accusatory, just clarifying. No, Victoria said, you are not here to fill a void in my life. You are here because you needed help and I was able to provide it. But she paused. I will not lie and say I have not been lonely. I will not pretend that having you here has not made this apartment feel less like a museum and more like a place where people actually live. Sophia seemed to accept this answer. Okay, I can work with that. At least you were being honest. They finished dinner in companionable silence. Victoria showed Sophia how to work the television and left her watching some show about teenagers in a magical school while she retreated to her office. The reports she had been neglecting for days would not wait any longer, but she found it hard to concentrate. Her attention kept drifting to the hallway, listening for sounds of Sophia moving around, making sure she was still there, still okay. Around 10, she forced herself to check on the girl. Sophia was asleep on the couch, the television still playing softly. She looked younger in sleep, the defensive hardness melting away to reveal the child she should have been allowed to be. Victoria found a blanket and carefully draped it over her, then turned off the television. As she walked back to her office, she caught her reflection in one of the hallway mirrors. She looked the same as always. Polished, professional, controlled. But something in her eyes was different. Softer, maybe, or perhaps just less guarded. Victoria Chen, who had built her identity around being untouchable and independent, had just willingly become responsible for someone else's well-being. It was terrifying. It was irrational. It was possibly the first genuine decision she had made in years. Before turning in for the night, Victoria stopped by Sophia's room one more time, just to check. The girl had moved at some point, leaving the couch for the actual bedroom. She was curled up in the bed, the blankets pulled tight around her, sleeping in a way that suggested she had not felt truly safe in a very long time. Victoria stood in the doorway, watching this stranger who was becoming something more. A responsibility, a ward, perhaps even, eventually, something like family, though that word felt too big and too complicated to use yet. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. School enrollment, medical appointments, the thousand small details of integrating a teenager into her structured life. But tonight, Victoria let herself feel something she had not allowed in years. Satisfaction that was not attached to a business deal or professional achievement. The simple, uncomplicated satisfaction of knowing she had done something good. Something that mattered in a way that quarterly profits and board meetings never could. She closed the door softly and went to her own room, where she slept better than she had in months, maybe years. And if she woke briefly in the night and found herself listening to make sure Sophia was still breathing in the next room, she did not question why. Some instincts were deeper than logic. The morning light filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting geometric shadows across Victoria's bedroom. She woke earlier than usual, disoriented for a moment before remembering why. Sophia, the girl, was here, sleeping in the guest room, transforming Victoria's carefully ordered existence into something unpredictable and alive. Victoria went through her morning routine with unusual attention to noise, mindful of not waking her unexpected house guest. She made coffee quietly, answered emails on her tablet while standing at the kitchen counter, and was halfway through reviewing a contract when she heard the soft padding of footsteps in the hallway. Sophia appeared in the doorway wearing the same clothes from yesterday, her hair tangled from sleep, looking uncertain about whether she was allowed to be there. Victoria set down her tablet and smiled, an expression that still felt slightly foreign on her face at this early hour. "Good morning. Did you sleep well?" Sophia nodded, moving into the kitchen with careful steps as though afraid of breaking something. Better than I have in weeks. The bed is really comfortable. Victoria poured orange juice into a glass and handed it to the girl. Are you hungry? I can make breakfast, though I should warn you my cooking skills are limited to toast and scrambled eggs. That sounds amazing, Sophia said, her eyes brightening at the mention of food. Mama used to make eggs with cheese and peppers. Do you have those? Together, they worked in the kitchen, an awkward collaboration between someone who rarely cooked and someone who knew her way around ingredients, but had been away from a proper kitchen for too long. The eggs turned out better than Victoria expected, fluffy and warm, seasoned with memories of Isabella Torres and the simple joy of sharing a meal. Over breakfast, they discussed practical matters. School enrollment would happen Monday, giving them the weekend to prepare. Shopping for clothes and supplies would fill today. Victoria had already contacted Lincoln Middle School, pulling strings to expedite Sophia's readmission despite the bureaucratic obstacles that had prevented it before. Money and influence opened doors that desperation could not. After breakfast, Victoria drove them to a shopping district she rarely visited, the kind with department stores catering to families rather than business executives. Sophia was quiet during the drive, watching the city pass by with an expression Victoria could not quite read. When they arrived, the girl hesitated before getting out of the car. I have never been to stores like this, she admitted. Mama and I shopped at thrift stores mostly. This feels too expensive. Victoria locked the car and faced Sophia directly. You need clothes for school. You need basic necessities. This is not extravagant, this is essential. Please let me do this without feeling guilty about it. They spent 3 hours navigating stores that overwhelmed Sophia with choices. Jeans and sweaters, school uniforms and casual wear, shoes that actually fit properly, a winter coat that would keep her warm. Sophia protested the expense at every turn until Victoria finally stopped in the middle of the junior department and took both of her hands. Listen to me. Your mother worked 3 jobs trying to give you opportunities. She would want you to have these things. She would want you to go to school properly dressed, to not stand out as the poor kid. Let me help you honor what she wanted for you. The logic reached Sophia in a way that simple generosity had not. She stopped protesting, though she remained careful with her selections, choosing practical items over fashionable ones, always checking price tags despite Victoria's insistence that cost was irrelevant. By the time they loaded shopping bags into the car, Sophia looked exhausted but pleased, running her hand over the soft fabric of her new coat as though she could not quite believe it was hers. That evening, Victoria ordered Chinese takeout, and they ate together while Sophia told stories about her mother. Isabella had immigrated from Mexico at 19, pregnant and alone, determined to give her unborn child a better life. She worked as a housekeeper, a waitress, a factory line worker, whatever paid enough to keep them housed and fed. She never complained, never showed Sophia the exhaustion that must have consumed her. She just kept moving forward, kept believing that sacrifice today meant opportunity tomorrow. She sounds like she was incredibly strong, Victoria said, watching emotions play across Sophia's young face. She was. Sophia's voice was thick with unshed tears. But she should not have had to be that strong. She should have had help, support, something more than just endless work and worry. Victoria thought about Isabella Torres dying because she could not afford proper health care, thought about Sophia nearly dying on the street because systems designed to protect children had failed her, thought about all the ways society abandoned people who most needed its support. The anger that rose in her chest was familiar, the same anger that had driven her own success. But now it felt different, less about personal vindication and more about fundamental injustice. You are right, Victoria said firmly. She should not have had to struggle alone. No one should. And while I cannot change what happened to your mother, I can make sure you do not face the same struggles. You will have opportunities she never did. You will get the education she dreamed of for you. That is how we honor her memory. Sophia looked at Victoria with those penetrating amber eyes that seemed to see past every defense. You really mean that, do not you? This is not just charity or guilt or whatever. You actually care. Victoria met her gaze without flinching. I am learning to care. I spent so many years not caring, not letting anyone matter, that it became automatic. But yes, I care about what happens to you. I care that you get the chance your mother wanted you to have." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the remains of their dinner between them, an understanding forming that went beyond words. Victoria had offered shelter and support. Sophia had accepted with cautious hope. Now, they were building something more complex, the fragile architecture of trust that neither of them was particularly good at constructing. Monday morning arrived with the chaos of school preparation. Sophia was nervous, her hands shaking slightly as she put on her new uniform. Victoria, who had faced down hostile boardrooms and aggressive competitors without flinching, found herself equally anxious about a simple school drop-off. They drove to Lincoln Middle School in unusual quiet, both lost in their own concerns. The principal, Mrs. Henderson, met them in her office with the kind of warm professionalism that suggested she had been thoroughly briefed on the situation. She welcomed Sophia back, expressed sympathy for her loss, and outlined the support services available. A counselor would check in regularly. Teachers had been notified to provide extra assistance if needed. The school would do everything possible to help Sophia succeed. Victoria listened to these assurances while watching Sophia's face. The girl was good at hiding her feelings, but Victoria was learning to read the small tells. The way her jaw tightened when overwhelmed, the slight widening of her eyes when scared, the careful stillness when she was trying not to show vulnerability. Right now, Sophia was terrified, though she would never admit it. When Mrs. Henderson finished her speech, Victoria asked for a moment alone with Sophia. The principal stepped out graciously, leaving them in the office surrounded by motivational posters and student artwork. "You do not have to do this today if you are not ready," Victoria said gently. "We can wait another week, give you more time to adjust." Sophia shook her head firmly. "Mama always said education was the most important thing. I have already missed too much school. I need to start catching up." Victoria recognized that determination, had felt it herself decades ago when she was young and desperate to prove she belonged in spaces that did not want her. "All right, but if it becomes too much, if you need anything, you call me. I do not care if I am in a meeting or on a call with investors. You are more important." Sophia looked startled, then something soft and vulnerable crossed her face. "No one has ever said that to me before, that I was more important than their work." "Well, get used to it," Victoria said, surprised by the fierce protectiveness she felt. "You're my priority now. Everything else comes second." She walked Sophia to her first class, ignoring the curious stares from students who wondered why this girl had a businesswoman in an expensive suit escorting her. At the classroom door, Sophia hesitated, then quickly hugged Victoria before disappearing inside. The gesture was so fast Victoria barely had time to respond, but it left her standing in the hallway, feeling strangely emotional. The day passed slowly. Victoria tried to focus on work, on the merger negotiations that required her attention, on the pharmaceutical trials that needed review. But her mind kept drifting to Sophia, wondering how she was managing, whether the other students were kind, whether the teachers understood what she had been through. At 2 o'clock, Victoria did something she had never done before. She left the office early. She arrived at the school 10 minutes before dismissal, waiting in her car like the other parents. When Sophia emerged from the building, she looked tired but intact, carrying a backpack filled with books and assignments. She spotted Victoria's car, and her face brightened in a way that made Victoria's chest feel uncomfortably tight. "How was it?" Victoria asked as Sophia climbed into the passenger seat. "Hard," Sophia admitted. "I am behind in most subjects. Everyone else has been in school all year while I was living on the streets." But she straightened her shoulders with determination. "The teachers gave me extra materials. I can catch up if I work hard enough." "You will catch up," Victoria assured her. "And if you need tutors or any other help, we will get it. You do not have to do this alone." That became their routine. Victoria dropped Sophia at school each morning, usually arriving at her office by 9 instead of her previous 7. She left work by 3 to pick Sophia up spending the late afternoon helping with homework despite her limited patience for middle school mathematics. Her evenings, once filled with business calls and reports, now revolved around meals with Sophia and conversations that ranged from school gossip to deeper discussions about life, loss, and what came next. The changes rippled through Victoria's carefully structured existence like stones dropped in still water. Her assistant noticed immediately, remarking that Victoria seemed more present during meetings, less distracted by the constant urgency that had defined her for years. Board members commented that she looked healthier, less drawn, though she was working fewer hours than ever before. Even her competitors noticed something different in her negotiating style, a confidence that came from having priorities beyond business success. But the transformation was not smooth or easy. There were arguments when Sophia pushed boundaries, testing whether Victoria's patience had limits. There were moments of frustration when Victoria's need for control clashed with Sophia's fierce independence. There were nights when Sophia cried herself to sleep missing her mother, and Victoria stood helpless outside her door, not knowing how to comfort someone experiencing grief so profound. 3 weeks into their new arrangement, they had their first real fight. Sophia had stayed late after school without telling Victoria, who spent 2 hours in rising panic calling the school, checking hospitals, driving through neighborhoods trying to find her. When Sophia finally walked in at 7, laughing with a new friend she had made, Victoria's fear transformed instantly into anger. "Where were you?" Victoria's voice was sharp, cutting. "I have been looking everywhere for you. I thought something terrible had happened." Sophia's smile faded, replaced by defensive irritation. "I was at the library working on a project. I am not a baby who needs constant supervision. You are 14 years old, and you have been living with me for less than a month. You do not get to disappear without telling me where you are going. Do you have any idea how scared I was?" The argument escalated quickly, both of them saying things they did not quite mean, words sharpened by fear and frustration. Sophia shouted that Victoria was not her mother, had no right to control her. Victoria shouted back that as long as Sophia lived under her roof, she followed the rules. It ended with Sophia slamming her bedroom door and Victoria standing alone in the hallway, shaking with emotions she could not name. Victoria retreated to her office, poured herself a drink she did not want, and stared out at the city lights. Was this what parenting felt like? This constant oscillation between love and frustration, fear and anger, the exhausting work of caring about someone while watching them push away? She had no reference point for healthy family dynamics, no model to follow. Her own parents had loved her, but been too consumed by survival to provide emotional support. She had built her adult life specifically to avoid this kind of messy, emotional entanglement. An hour later, there was a soft knock on her office door. Sophia stood there, eyes red from crying, looking young and uncertain. "I am sorry," she said quietly. "I should have called. I did not think about how worried you would be." Victoria set down her glass and gestured for Sophia to come in. "I am sorry too. I should not have yelled. I was just scared." They sat together on the leather couch, not quite touching, but close enough to feel each other's presence. Sophia spoke first. "Mama used to worry like that. I forgot what it felt like to have someone notice if I came home. On the streets, I could disappear and no one would care." "I would care," Victoria said firmly. "I care very much about your safety and well-being. That is why I reacted so strongly. Not because I want to control you, but because the thought of something happening to you terrifies me." Sophia leaned against Victoria's shoulder, a gesture of trust and affection. "I am not used to anyone caring. I am not used to having rules and expectations. It is going to take me time to adjust." Victoria put her arm around the girl, feeling the weight of responsibility and affection settle over her like a blanket. "We are both learning. We will make mistakes, but we figure out together, all right?" "Together," Sophia agreed. As fall turned to winter, their relationship deepened and evolved. Sophia thrived at school, her natural intelligence emerging now that she had stability and support. Her grades climbed from failing to passing to excelling. Teachers sent home glowing reports about her focus and determination. She joined the art club, discovering a talent for painting that reminded Victoria painfully and beautifully of everything Sophia had lost. Victoria found herself changing in ways she had not anticipated. She smiled more, laughed at things that would have annoyed her months ago. She took Sundays off completely, something she had not done in 20 years, spending the day with Sophia exploring museums or trying new restaurants or simply staying home watching movies. She kept a photograph of Sophia on her desk at work, right next to the one of Isabella Torres that Sophia had given her, a reminder of why she worked and what truly mattered. One Saturday in December, Victoria took Sophia shopping for winter clothes, a repeat of their first shopping trip, but with the easy familiarity of people who knew each other well. They were laughing about something ridiculous when Sophia suddenly stopped in the middle of the store. "Can I ask you something?" Sophia's expression was serious, uncertain. Of course, Victoria said, immediately concerned. "What is wrong?" "Nothing is wrong. It is just." Sophia took a breath. "At school, when people ask about you, I do not know what to call you. You're not my mom, but you are not just some lady I live with either. We're we to each other." Victoria felt her heart constrict. It was a question she had been avoiding, afraid of the answer, afraid of claiming a relationship that felt too big and too important to name. But Sophia deserved honesty. "What do you want us to be?" Victoria asked carefully. Sophia looked down at her hands. "I do not want to replace my mama, but I also do not want to keep explaining to everyone that we have no real connection. Because we do have a connection. You saved my life. You gave me a home. You care about what happens to me. That is family, is not it? Family." The word hung between them, enormous and terrifying and perfect. Victoria thought about the last few months, about how this girl had transformed her empty penthouse into a home, her rigid routine into a life, her careful isolation into connection. Family was exactly what they had become, built not from biology, but from choice and effort and growing affection. "Yes," Victoria said softly, "that is family. Maybe not in the traditional sense, but in the ways that matter. You're my family, Sophia. If you want to be." Sophia's eyes filled with tears. "Can I call you something? Not mom, but something that means you are important to me? Call me whatever feels right," Victoria said, pulling Sophia into a hug right there in the middle of the crowded store. "I will answer to anything as long as it means you are staying." "What about Vic?" Sophia suggested, her voice muffled against Victoria's coat. "It is casual, but also kind of affectionate. Like a nickname family members use." Victoria laughed, surprised by how much she liked it. "Vic, yes, I can work with that." That evening, Victoria made a decision she had been contemplating for weeks. She called Sophia into her office, where she had documents spread across her desk. The girl looked nervous, probably remembering the last serious conversation they had in this room. "Sit down," Victoria said gently. "I want to discuss something important with you." Sophia sat on the edge of the chair, her posture defensive. "If this is about my grades, I am working really hard. My math test was just one bad score." "Your grades are excellent, and I am incredibly proud of you," Victoria assured her. "This is about something else, something I've been discussing with my lawyers." She pushed the documents across the desk. Sophia looked at them but did not pick them up, clearly confused. Victoria took a steadying breath. "I want to officially adopt you," she said. "Not as a replacement for your mother, never that, but as a way to make our relationship legally recognized. You would have the security of knowing this is permanent, that you're not just a temporary guest in my home. You would be my daughter in every legal sense." Sophia stared at the papers, her expression unreadable. When she finally looked up, her eyes were bright with tears. "You want to adopt me? Officially?" "Only if you want it to," Victoria clarified quickly. "This is not something I would force on you. If you would rather keep things as they are, that is absolutely fine. But if you want the security and permanence of legal adoption, I am offering that." Sophia picked up the papers, scanning them without really reading. "What about Mama? What about keeping her memory alive? Adopting you does not erase your mother," Victoria said firmly. "Isabella will always be your mother. She raised you, loved you, sacrificed for you. I'm not trying to replace her or make you forget her. I'm just trying to make sure you have the security and stability she would have wanted for you. Sophia set the papers down carefully. Can I think about it? Of course. Take all the time you need. This is a big decision. For 3 days, Sophia was unusually quiet, clearly wrestling with the question. Victoria gave her space, not pushing, not pressuring, letting her work through the complex emotions that the adoption offer had stirred up. On the 4th day, Sophia came to Victoria's office after school. I talked to Mama, Sophia said without preamble. At the cemetery. I go there sometimes after school, just to talk to her, tell her about my day. Victoria felt a pang of guilt. She had not known Sophia was visiting her mother's grave. I did not realize. Do you want me to go with you next time? Maybe, Sophia said. But that is not the point. I told Mama about the adoption, about you wanting to make it official. And I think she would approve. I think she would be happy knowing I have someone to take care of me. Someone who chose me not because they had to, but because they wanted to. Victoria felt tears threatening. Does that mean yes? Sophia smiled, that transformative expression that lit up her whole face. Yes, let's do it. Let's make it official. The adoption process took 4 months of paperwork, interviews, and legal procedures. Throughout it all, their relationship continued to deepen. Victoria learned about Sophia's dreams of becoming an architect, combining her mathematical mind with her artistic talent. Sophia learned about Victoria's past, about the struggles and sacrifices that had shaped her. They build traditions. Friday night pizza, Sunday morning pancakes, late night conversations about everything and nothing. The legal adoption was finalized on a Tuesday in April. The courtroom was small, the ceremony simple, but the meaning was enormous. When the judge declared Victoria Chen as Sophia Torres Chen's legal mother, Victoria felt something break open inside her chest, some long-frozen place that finally thawed. Sophia cried openly, tears of grief and joy mingled together. They left the courthouse as a family, legally recognized and emotionally bound. That night, they celebrated with a quiet dinner at home. Victoria had learned to cook a few more dishes under Sophia's patient instruction, and together they prepared Isabella's recipe for enchiladas, a tribute to the woman whose absence shaped their present. They ate surrounded by photographs, old ones of Isabella and Sophia, alongside new ones documenting their growing life together. Victoria looked across the table at her daughter, this remarkable girl who had survived so much and still managed to hope, to trust, to love. Sophia caught her gaze and smiled, amber eyes warm with contentment. "What are you thinking?" Sophia asked. Victoria considered the question. 6 months ago, she had been living in this same penthouse, surrounded by success and drowning in loneliness. She had everything she thought she wanted and nothing that actually mattered. Then a storm had brought them together, a chance encounter that changed everything. "I am thinking about how one rainy evening can transform your entire life," Victoria said. "How stopping to help a stranger can lead to this." She gestured around them, at the home they had built together, at the family photographs on the walls, at the life that neither of them had planned but both of them needed. Sophia reached across the table and took Victoria's hand. "Mama used to say that angels show up when you need them most," Sophia said softly. "Sometimes they have wings. Sometimes they have designer suits and expensive cars. But they always show up exactly when they are supposed to." Victoria squeezed her daughter's hand, feeling the weight and wonder of their journey. From that desperate moment in the rain to this peaceful evening in their home, they had traveled an impossible distance. They had both been saved that night. Sophia from the cold and hunger and danger of the streets. Victoria from the cold and emptiness and isolation of her carefully constructed life. The storm had passed. The rain had stopped. And in its wake, something beautiful had grown. A family built not from obligation or biology, but from choice and courage, and the simple, profound act of showing up for each other. Victoria Chen had lifted up a collapsing girl and discovered her own salvation. Sophia Torres had accepted help from a stranger and found a home. Together, they had learned the most important truth of all, that love is not something you plan or control or achieve. It is something you choose every single day in 1,000 small moments that add up to a life worth living. Outside the windows, the city lights sparkled against the dark sky. Somewhere out there, other people were struggling, other children needed help, other lives waited to be transformed by simple acts of kindness. Victoria and Sophia could not save everyone, but they had saved each other, and that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. Up next, you have got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you will not want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.